All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're going to demystify the absolute deepest biological drives and those complex emotional responses that basically dictate why we do what we do. Have you ever wondered what actually gets you out of bed in the morning, or why you react the way you do when things go wrong? Well, we're going to map all of that out right here. I love starting with this profound thought from the Marquis de Vauvenargues: emotion has taught mankind to reason. It perfectly sets the stage for our journey today. It reminds us that our internal feelings aren't just random noise. They actually bridge the gap to logical human action.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at the cycle of motivation, biological and social motives, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, understanding human emotions, and finally, managing and enhancing emotions. We're basically taking an inside-out journey, starting from our unconscious biological engines and moving outward to a practical toolkit for your emotional dashboard.
So, Section 1, the cycle of motivation. Let's actually look at the literal meaning of the word motivation. It's derived from the Latin word movere, which simply means movement. It is the literal force that moves us to act. To really picture this movement, think about some everyday scenarios in action. Picture Sunita, who's grinding away studying 10 to 12 hours a day for her exams. Or Hemant, a physically challenged guy putting in the grueling work to train for a mountaineering expedition. Or Aman, who's saving up every single penny of his scholarship money just to buy his mom a gift. You see, these real-world examples show us that every persistent, goal-driven behavior we undertake is pushed by an underlying motive. We don't just act randomly. And that brilliantly illustrates what we call the motivational cycle. Think of it like a loop. It all kicks off with a need, a lack or deficit of some necessity. That deficit creates a drive, which is basically a state of internal tension and arousal. That arousal is the spark. It energizes us into goal-directed behavior. And once we finally hit that goal, boom, achievement, followed by a sweet reduction in arousal. It's a continuous loop showing exactly how lacking something fuels us until balance is totally restored. Moving on to Section 2, biological and social motives. So you might be wondering, what exactly triggers this cycle in the first place? And are there different biological engines running behind the scenes? Well, there's actually a super fascinating divide between our innate survival mechanics and our social motives. On the innate biological side, we've got hunger, which is a complex system regulated by your hypothalamus and liver, thirst, driven by cell dehydration, and sex, which is kind of unique because it isn't actually essential for individual survival and doesn't aim for homeostasis, that internal bodily balance. Then, over on the psychosocial side, we have motives we learn from our environment. Things like affiliation, the need for power, the drive for achievement, and just pure curiosity. Let's zoom in on one of those learned motives for a second, the need for achievement, or NH. Psychologists describe this as a person's core desire to hit standards of excellence. People with high NH actually prefer moderately difficult tasks, and they actively seek out feedback on their performance. So remember Sunita from our earlier example? High NH is exactly what's driving her to tackle those rigorous exams, pushing her to constantly adjust her goals to meet new challenges. Now, another really interesting psychosocial motive is the need for power. David McClellan broke this down into 4 specific expressions. First, you can gain power from outside sources, like idolizing a sports star. Second, you can build it from within, literally by building up your own body. Third, you can impact individuals directly through competition or arguing. Or fourth, you can impact people as a member of an organization, like a political leader. McClellan's theory is so cool because it highlights that the need for power isn't just one-dimensional. It actually evolves with our age and experiences across these 4 stages. Section 3, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let's see how all these motives fit together into one of the absolute most famous psychological frameworks out there, designed by Abraham Maslow. Maslow organized human needs like a pyramid. Right at the base, you've got physiological needs, hunger, thirst, the bare essentials. Just above that are safety needs, like being free from danger. Then comes belongingness and love, followed that esteem needs, like self-worth. Finally, right at the very peak, is self-actualization, reaching your absolute fullest potential. The core rule here is that you must adequately satisfy those dominant lower-level survival needs before the higher aspirations can truly capture your focus. But wait, there's a really compelling exception that challenges this model. Why do soldiers, police officers, or firefighters willingly face incredibly dangerous situations? It completely contradicts the idea that basic safety needs have to come first, right? It's a great reminder that while the hierarchy is a super powerful model, actual human actions and complex ideals can sometimes completely transcend basic safety. Section 4. Understanding human emotions. Okay, so we know what moves us, but how do you know what someone is feeling when they finally achieve or, fail to achieve that goal? That is where emotion enters the picture. Think of emotions as your internal subjective dashboard. They aren't simple. They're a complex package involving physiological activation, a conscious feeling, and cognitive labeling. Now, researchers universally recognize 6 basic ones: anger, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, and surprise. Though it's worth noting, Izard proposes 10 basic emotions, and Plutchik suggests 8 arranged in opposing pairs. Also, research shows that women generally experience most emotions, except anger, more intensely than men, often due to differing social roles. But regardless of the exact count, researchers agree that these core reactions are a universal human experience. So how do we broadcast these feelings? Well, we use nonverbal kinetic facial expressions for things like fear, anger, happiness, and sadness to expose our internal state to the outside world. Actually, Charles Darwin himself believed that these specific facial expressions for basic emotions are completely inborn and universal across all of humanity. But here's the catch. While the expressions themselves might be universal, our culture heavily dictates our behavior and how we label them. For instance, in Latin American and Southern European cultures, locking eyes, a direct gaze, is totally preferred during interaction. But in many Asian cultures, a peripheral gaze, kind of looking away, is what's considered appropriate. And get this, North Americans have 40 different labels for the facial expression of anger, but the Tahitian language, they have 46 specific labels just for the word anger itself. So a polite look in one country could literally mean something entirely different in another. Finally, we reach Section 5, Managing and Enhancing Emotions. For this last part, we're making the pivot from textbook to toolkit. We're going to focus on some actionable steps to really manage our mental well-being. To really grasp why managing our emotions is so crucial, just look at what happens when they get completely overwhelmed. At the extreme end of the emotional disruption spectrum, severe traumas like natural disasters can trigger post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. People with PTSD re-experience the trauma through flashbacks, causing intense emotional disturbance. It powerfully shows us just how vital emotional balance is for our everyday basic functioning.
But let's talk about something a bit more common, like exam anxiety. When you're facing acute stress, you can use monitoring strategies to take direct control. Things like preparing well in advance, doing mock rehearsals, and practicing positive thinking. On the flip side, if you need to calm your body's sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight response, you can use blunting strategies. This means avoiding the stressor by learning relaxation techniques, doing light exercise, or reducing external stimulation. Having both of these in your toolkit gives you a great structured way to handle stress.
And we can apply this same kind of cognitive control to managing anger. The absolute biggest takeaway here is recognizing that anger is a result of your own thinking. Seriously, it is not an automatic, uncontrollable reflex caused by other people. You have to actively stop engaging in self-talk that burns or magnifying negative feelings. Because anger is actually a self-induced choice, that means you and only you hold the power to cognitively restructure those negative thoughts. You have to look inward, not outward. And hey, it's not just about managing the bad stuff. Actively cultivating positive emotions like hope, joy, and gratitude isn't just about feeling warm and fuzzy. It physically protects your immune system. Plus, it makes us proactive. Cultivating positive emotions literally broadens our ability to think of new possibilities and builds up our long-term resilience so we can solve complex problems down the line. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. Now that you understand the gears of your motivation and the dials of your emotions, how are you going to rewrite your own self-talk today? I sincerely hope this explainer helps you harness your drives and optimize your everyday well-being. Keep learning and keep growing.